What are you doing here? Don't answer that question just yet. You may or may not have seen a series of sketches on Saturday Night Live, which I try not to reference more than twice a year or so, because I totally would, but I don't. It's a series of sketches called The Californians. Anyone? It's like a pseudo soap opera, like a mock soap opera, right, where they're all in LA. And the funniest recurring gag in that sketch, that series of sketches, is that everyone always is talking about the routes and the roads that they took to get wherever they're at. and then the invariable response is to tell someone exactly what route they should take to get out of here. Like here. And I've heard that this is accurate too, that people in Los Angeles and we don't have our Californians here. Oh, a little bit, right? Yep. Always talking about roads and traffic and how they got here and how they're leaving here and all. Okay, all right, story checks out. That's the funniest recurring gag, but the funniest line that keeps coming back again and again is when they say, "Ooh, what are you doing here?" And they really play it up for laughs with this California accent nobody knew existed, but apparently it does. What are you doing here? So they're asking each other constantly, like, tell me why you're here, and tell me how you got here, and how you're going to leave, and how quickly. And actually that reminds me of a much older story about Rabbi Akiva, one of the great Jewish leaders of the first century. Now this story might be just as fictional as the SNL sketch, but it's still a good story. And that is that one evening after synagogue was over, Rabbi Akiva, he left the synagogue and was walking back to his home in Capernaum, but he was so lost in thought and all of the ideas that had been presented that evening at synagogue that he took a wrong turn. And without even realizing it, he all of a sudden heard this voice booming from above him that said, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" And so he was shocked in this moment, of course. He's like, "What?" And he looks up and he sees a guard standing on top of a Roman garrison. And he says, What did you say?" And then the guard says it again, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" So like a good rabbi, he decides he's going to answer a question with a question of his own. And he says, "How much do they pay you to ask me these questions?" So he says, 2 drachma per week. Why? So the rabbi says, "Well, I'll pay you 4 drachma every week to stand outside my house and ask me those questions each morning. Who are you? What are you doing here?" You remember how I started this sermon? What are you doing here? Now, the answers in your minds are probably fairly simple to that question. It's Sunday, Ryan. We're in church. We're here for church. I mean, I know why I'm here. You know, I work here, right? You pay me to do this, and I'm very thankful. I love my job, and I appreciate that. But I like to ask questions like a 5-year-old sometimes. You know, I like to say, well, we're in church. It's Sunday. We're in church. Well, why? Because Christians go to church. Okay, why? Because Jesus said to go to church, right? Why? This is where we have trouble. Okay, to worship Jesus and to learn about God and all of that, right? But why? Why that? And sometimes I feel like we could use a Roman soldier standing outside our front door and shouting at us on our way in, like, "Who are you and what are you doing here?" That might be considered bad hospitality, though. We might have some visitors choose not to come back or not to come in at all if we did that. But I think some of us who are regulars might benefit from that. Having that question in front of us all the time. And I wonder if Jesus had that question in his head when he had this little encounter with James and John. asking if they could sit at the left hand and the right hand of Jesus in the kingdom. And I feel like Jesus had that moment. It's like, is that what you're doing here? After all this that we've been through, after everything I've said to you? Is that why you're here? For status? For power? Now, I think James and John were probably good kids. And I don't think they woke up that morning thinking, how can I get some status and some power out of this situation? I think they were just struggling to really understand Jesus' purpose. And we see that. That's a constant theme throughout the Gospels, is people just not quite getting it. Even those who are closest to Jesus. Even his mother at times imagined him with this sort of glorious purpose, right? He came, even though with the humble, and his mother knew it as well as anybody, if not better, with the humble entrance into the world and this humble beginnings, but still this sense that, well, you're on this trajectory to glory and power. And why shouldn't your closest associates, why shouldn't those who are your best friends and the most faithful be a part of that, right? They're struggling with this. And so what are our answers to that? Jesus, I think, is asking us that question too. Is that what you're here for? And maybe we're not asking Jesus to sit at his left and his right hand, but we think about a lot of stuff, right? We get mired in a lot of questions and a lot of problems and a lot of little things. And I think Jesus sometimes asks us, what are you doing here? And so we might answer that question a number of different ways. We might say, well, I'm here to help those in need. That's a good thing, but if that's the case, why aren't we doing that right now? Or we might say, I'm here for community, for togetherness. Also a good thing, but if that's the case, we could be out having brunch right now. It'd be cheaper. To be honest, let's just have brunch every Sunday morning. We'll have a great community and we won't have to mess with all this, right? Or you might say, I'm here to pray. But that's easier at home than to come here and pray together, isn't it? Or maybe you say, I'm here to follow Jesus. And if that's what is in our minds, then maybe we should take a closer look at Jesus' purpose. If our purpose is to match Jesus' purpose, let's look at Jesus' purpose for a moment. And I think the reading in Hebrews is a good one for that. Because we see the author of Hebrews painting this picture of Jesus' glorious and transcendent and magnificent purpose. He identifies Jesus as the great high priest, a priest in the order of Melchizedek, which doesn't really mean a whole lot to us on the face of it, until you look under the surface and you see that what the writer of Hebrews is saying is that Jesus not only qualifies as a priest. Of course, he's not in the priestly line, he's in the kingly line, right? He's son of David, not son of Aaron or Levi. So people are asking, is he qualified to even be our priest? And Hebrews is saying, not only is he qualified to be a priest, his purpose and his destiny is to be the great high priest, not just over Israel, like the Levitical priests, but over all of humanity. And that is a magnificent purpose. That is a glorious purpose. And yet, Jesus didn't take it on for himself. He is glorified by the Father, as we see all throughout Scripture. But he didn't seek it for himself. Unlike some disciples we know, James and John. But looking back at the gospel reading, I think we can see that Jesus knew what he was doing there. He knew why he was there, and he made it really clear at the end of the reading, didn't he? He said, for the Son of Man has come not to be served, but to serve. He didn't come for status, even though he deserved all the status, right? He didn't come for power, even though he deserved all the power. And despite those lofty and glorious roles that Jesus might have assumed, Instead, he came and simply said, I'm here to help. Imagine if Tom Hanks or Taylor Swift or Joe Biden or some famous lofty person showed up at your door and said, I'm here to help clean out your gutters. Say, no, what are you doing here? Again, why would you, of all people, show up at my door to help me, to serve me? And this is how Jesus comes to us, knowing his purpose and then asking for ours. Jesus wants to know, and the world wants to know, what are we doing here? You think they don't ask that question every time they drive past tens of thousands of cars going by on Lee Summit Road every day, looking at this church? Some of you are here because you saw it from the street, right? And some people look at it and say, well, that looks sweet and charming and lovely, or it looks humble, or it looks dilapidated. They might have all kinds of different thoughts, depending on your standards, right? But they look at this and they might wonder, especially if they see cars outside, what are those people doing in there? Don't they have something better to do? I don't know. But the easy answer, when we're asked that question, is to say what Jesus said. And to just say, we are here to serve. And we could make a nice mission statement out of that, and we could put it on the wall or something if we want. That might be a good idea. But it doesn't get us very far, does it? Just to say we're here to serve. Because if we're just all about serving, and that's it, we could, again, be anywhere. We could be at Habitat for Humanity, or the Community Services League, or the United Way, or all of these thousands of wonderful organizations where people serve other people, and we could be doing that. But there's a reciprocity to following Jesus, isn't there? It's not just, hey, get off your butt, go and serve. There's a recognition of what it means to be human, and the reason why we so often default to ego and to self-serving. There's a reason why James and John said what they said, and why Jesus struggles so much with their disciples, because you can't just tell people, hey, go serve, and they do it. We've been around the sun enough times to get that. We need more. The reason we default to ego so often is because we are so often hurt. We're walking wounded. We have absorbed all that the world has given us or taken from us. And we're hurting. And so just to survive, and I talked about this a little bit last week, we feel like we have to go inward sometimes just to survive. We have to create this shell around ourselves so that we don't get hurt again. And that shell is not great for serving, frankly. Because instead of healing the wound, we bandage it, we wrap it up, and we protect it from the world so it can't happen again. And Jesus sees that and has compassion on us and says, yes, I want you to serve like I serve, but maybe you need some attention first. And you even see the compassionate way that he handled James and John in that moment. He said, you're going to go through some stuff just like I am. But there's healing in me. This is how he talks to us. He says, whoever is weary and heavy laden, come to me, and I will give you rest. Jesus calls us to serve, but he also knows what we need. And yeah, I said that I'm here because this is my job, right? If you ask me what I'm doing here, I'm saying, well, I'm contractually obligated. But I need healing too. And I'm in that process of overcoming the things that the world has thrown at me, just like the world has thrown things at you. has tried to silence you or has tried to break your spirit and has tried to stop you from filling that purpose in the way that Jesus calls us to do. So what are we doing here? I believe we are here to find the healing of Jesus. And in the process, we're here to find the hope of Jesus. And once we have those things, we are here to give them away. Amen.